One day I got a call on the telephone just out of nowhere. A guy named Tim Layton called and said, "Can you come down and meet with me?" I'd never met him before. So I went down to a church by the football stadium, and he asked me some questions. He said, "I'm the stake president here of a married student stake." And he said, "I'm looking for a counselor." And so we had a meeting. It went really well, and I felt the Spirit of the Holy Ghost very strongly during our meeting. So I came home and I told my wife, I'm afraid that the meeting went too well. And a few days later, I got a call back from him and an invitation to, my wife and I went in, an invitation to serve as his counselor in the married 11th stake. And there were 8 wards in that stake that were married student stake. And so I didn't know him and he didn't know me, but we kind of hit it off and we were good friends. And so we were serving together. And after we'd served for about 4 months, they made a change and they did away with all of the young married stakes at BYU, or most of them, and they converted he and I and the members of the High Council into a young single adult stake. And so, as he said, we went to the meeting married and we left single. We were now in charge of the YSA 18th stake. So there were 8 wards in that stake, and they were all new wards. They had new bishops, and so we had to get to know them. And so it was a great experience, and Tim Layton became one of my best friends in life, and I love him. I learned so much from him. He was the managing partner of Sorensen Capital, and he was brilliant, and he had a very red, dynamic personality. And I get along well with that personality because you tell me what to do and I'll go do it. So he and I became very close friends through that service. So one of the things that we tried to understand there was the dating culture that we have in the LDS Church, especially in Utah County. And it's a little bit problematic. And I think it comes from, in our youth, we train our youth to focus on going on a mission. And so sometimes in order to do that, we steer them away from dating. And it's a good thing because, you know, if you get a steady girlfriend, or if you get into immorality, it prevents you from going out on a mission. But it also prevents them from knowing how to talk to girls. And so kids go on missions and, you know, they give a talk in the ward and ward members think they go and live happily ever after. But we found that a lot of them did not live happily ever after because now they were returned missionaries. They'd gone and lived with another guy for 2 years and they came back to Provo and, you know, were told or knew that the next step in their life was to find a woman to marry. The problem was a lot of them had never been on a date before and a lot of them didn't know how to talk to girls. Because it's different talking to girls than it is to talking to guys, and especially missionaries. And so they were very awkward in their dating practices. And so we're now working with the 18 to 30-year-olds, and we had a number of both males and females who were 25 and older who were very frustrated and angry because they were concerned that they would never get married. And in the Mormon religion, marriage is a very important part because we believe marriage is eternal. That you're going to serve, you're going to be together for eternity if you're married in the temple. And so everybody who's active in the church wants that, but sometimes it's hard to find that partner. And especially hard when the boys don't ask the girls out. That makes it really hard. And so in our stake, we had a number of young men in the stake who were returned missionaries who had given up on dating. They had tried to go on dates and it just didn't work right because they didn't know how to communicate with girls, and so they had just quit dating. So when you get to be 23, 24, 25 years old, and you're just staying at home all the time, then you get in your computer and sometimes things go from bad to worse. And so it's a difficult situation that we tried to address. So President Layton, Tim Layton, was very bright, and so he held some focus groups, and he talked to different groups of young single adults, and then he took all that information and he organized it and categorized it and found that the number one reason that people didn't get married was because they had fear. They had fear that things were going to go wrong, that it wasn't going to work out, that they were going to get divorced, or they had fear that they were going to marry the wrong person. And so fear was the root cause of why they weren't dating. And that, we realized, was a problem on our part, that we hadn't properly taught them the doctrine of the fall, meaning that when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, that it was supposed to be hard. Life is going to be hard. And we as parents had raised our kids trying to, as I said, put a feather bed into the lone and dreary world so that they would never have any problems. And so they were afraid that they were going to struggle, that they weren't going to have money, that they weren't going to get along. Where our generation, we all knew that we were going to have money and we weren't going to get along. We just worked it out. And so addressing that fear became an important issue. The second was what we called the perfection complex. And that was that some people think they need to marry the perfect person. And they're not going to settle until they marry them. And so many of the young women in the church can relate to this, that at some point they have a standards night and they have the women get dressed up and they come to the church and the bishop's there and he gives them a flower. And then they give them a piece of paper and they say, okay, now I want you to write down the attributes that you want of your husband. And so those attributes are returned missionary, college graduate, makes a lot of money, superhero, drives a great car, whatever they have. And then they're told, don't settle for less. And so there's nothing wrong with that, but in many cases they then take this paper home, they put that in their treasures of truth or whatever box, or they hang on to that. And so when they go start dating, these are the things that they're looking for. Returned missionary, college graduate, makes a lot of money. And unfortunately, that person doesn't really exist. And those characteristics are not the things that are going to bring a lifelong loving relationship. Because you can have a returned missionary who's a real jerk. You can have somebody who makes a lot of money who is very selfish. And so those things are not indicators of what's going to be happy. So the third area that he found in his research was the awkwardness of dating. And so based on his research, I did some thinking and some research, and I put together a talk talking about the 3 keys to a lifelong loving relationship. And so what I challenged the young single adults to do, the sisters, was to throw away that list, because that person doesn't exist and you're never going to find that person, so don't even try. And instead to replace it with a different list. And the number 1 thing on the list is, are they selfless? Meaning, do they love other people more than they love themselves? And are they willing to love you more than they love themselves? So if somebody is selfless, you can get along with them really well. If they don't love God more than they love you, it's going to be hard for them to love you. And so selflessness is a real key indicator in making a long, loving relationship. And the second is, do they forgive easily? So a lot of times we do things wrong and we're going to do things wrong, but do you want to be with somebody who forgives easily or who holds a grudge? So I've made mistakes in my marriage, not big mistakes, but my wife forgives me easily. And so that's the kind of person you want to be married to, is somebody who forgives easily and seeks forgiveness easily. When they make a mistake, do they say they're sorry? Or do they just think that you're not worth apologizing to? The third thing is, do they communicate well? Are you able to talk? Are they able to say why your feelings and share feelings and resolve issues well? So I found that these 3 things, when I served as a bishop for 10 years, these were the 3 things that kept couples together. And so if you have those 3 things present in your marriage, if you're selfless, if you forgive easily, and you communicate well, couples will stay together regardless of what problems. I've seen couples who've had infidelity problems. I've seen couples who've had deaths of children. I've seen couples who've had huge financial problems. And if they are selfless, if they forgive easily and seek forgiveness, and if they communicate well, they will get through those things. They will learn to love again and realize it's just bent and not broken. And those are the things that you need to look for in a marriage partner, are those 3 things. So I told the young women to get rid of that list and start looking for men who possess those traits. And I told the young men the same thing, and more importantly, become those things. Not only look for someone with those traits, but become those traits. Become selfless. Seek to repent and seek to forgive. And learn how to communicate well your feelings. And those are the things that are going to make couples in love. If you meet somebody who is selfless, who easily forgives and communicates well, you will fall so deeply in love with them that you'll have joy in your life. Because those are the kinds of things that we want in a marriage relationship. It doesn't matter what car you drive or what you do for your living, how much money you make, because everybody's going to have problems anyway. You don't know that you're going to get those things. So don't worry about struggling. We learn from the struggle. but we'll get through the struggle if we possess those three traits.